This episode, a follow-up with Chad Carson, a 100-year-old remodel. We follow up with Chad Carson from CoachCarson.com. If you remember, we had Chad on several months ago to discuss the remodel of a 100-year-old triplex property that he bought. Chad is a successful real estate investor, podcaster, YouTuber, and author who teaches about real estate investing. He currently owns 110 properties, and he's done many remodels. In our first interview, the project was underway. This episode is a follow-up to the completion of that project. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show. Home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition's entitled, A Follow-Up with Chad Carson, a 100-year-old remodel. To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. John, what has been happening with your life?
Hey, Larry. Well, I'm back. I'm back from
vacation.
Vacation.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about when things can go wrong, they go wrong on some things. And that kind of leads us into this discussion. But I'll save all the gory details. Just a couple things. Overall, the vacation was fantastic. It was absolutely great. So,
and you went where?
And I'm back to the Florida Keys.
The fabulous Florida Keys. John and I
absolutely. And I'll post some videos I took of some of the building activities that were going on down there, and the maintenance that was happening down there. And
there's no
look
place.
At yourself and say, could I just be hanging around down here doing the same thing? Putting more nails in railings and things like that. But I will say that it's obviously I lived down there for years and years and years in Miami, but down in Florida, and a lot of our audience who might be down there in some of these real hot climates, the way the materials and everything really take a beating.
Yes,
that, Larry.
Yeah, they do.
And so, anyways, but enough of that. And I'm really looking forward to Chad. We had him on last time. It was great to have him on then. It was great to have him on now, and the follow up. So I think our listeners are going to get a lot of good advice from this.
And so we did. We did this, and we had a great interview. And here it is. We're here with Chad Carson. Chad, welcome.
Great to be back with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Chad.
So we wanted to dive right in on this one. Chad was on a previous show, and he had started a renovation on a 100-year-old triplex, which at that time you were running into a couple of issues. So I had a bunch of questions here. This was a really good project. I followed some of it on YouTube and things like that. So is the project complete, and is it rented out?
It's complete and it's rented, and I am breathing a big sigh of relief.
Did you keep it as a triplex? Is it still a triplex?
It's a triplex, and that was really the big picture of this whole project. I'm kind of a sucker for old properties. I think that we'll get into the pain of old properties, but it's still a triplex, and it's in a neighborhood of single family houses. It's in a good small town called Central, South Carolina, that I really like. The triplex was the big idea for me, was that, can we keep this as a triplex? I had a couple contractors said, you just need to bulldoze this thing. But I said, no, I want to keep this old triplex with the tall ceilings. And that was the vision of what we were trying to do.
Yeah. So you're a seasoned real estate investor, and you've got a very successful business. How many units do you have right now?
So I have a business partner. So the two of us have approximately 110 units.
110. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're up a little bit from when we talked to you the last time. You were around 90 the last time. So.
Yeah. It's got. We have acquired some multi-unit properties in the last couple of years, and then we've sold a couple of properties here and there. But we could stand to be less than that over the long run. But for the most part, we've outsourced almost all of our property management day to day. So it's made it easier to where every once in a while we have a big project like this, but the day to day rent collection, maintenance calls, things like that are off our plate and onto a really good team, a couple different property managers who do a great job.
Yeah, sweet. So let's go over this project a little. Just give us an overview from the beginning. So you bought this. Well, you tell the story. You know it better than I do. So.
Yeah, so this is it's 100. I say 100 plus years old. We don't know exactly, but I'm guessing 1890s, maybe 1900. It had an old tin roof, so that was the part you could really tell the era. It's a beautiful old tin roof that had leaks that had damaged half the rafters underneath the roof, I think. But it was built. It was built originally as a single family house, about 2,000 square feet. But at some point, I think in the 50s, 60s, 70s, somewhere in there, they had converted it to a triplex. And so there was a family who had owned it and rented it out for a long time, but needless to say, it had been neglected, a lot of deferred maintenance. And so it needed a lot of work. The seller was in a situation where they had some personal issues going on. And so in this neighborhood of, new houses sell for $200,000, $220,000, we bought this property for $40,000 up front.
And it sounds like a great deal until...
Until the purchase price is the least of the cost of this property, as we can get into. The remodel cost ended up dwarfing the actual purchase price.
Right. Yeah. Well, John and I, we deal, in our day-to-day work, we do a lot of, as you called it, deferred maintenance. We see tons of it just day to day. So, one of the things that I think this about our show, that we try to teach people, like, don't ignore that deferred maintenance, take care of things on a regular basis, because eventually it actually saves you a lot of money in the long term. So,
man, it's been one of the biggest lessons. I mean, I'll definitely plug that idea, because as a new investor who didn't know much about, properties, understanding how deferred maintenance works and what the costs are and how to allocate money for it absolutely is a difference maker. And as a real estate investor, I think it's one of the most neglected topics that people don't really discuss. And I'm glad y'all put it front and center.
Yeah, we discuss it from an investment standpoint, but even just from your home side, because John, we started this podcast to teach people, like, what are the things you're supposed to do on a regular basis so that your home doesn't, you don't get caught with all these major repairs all of a sudden because you've had a water leak that you haven't addressed for 20 years, right, John? I mean,
oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, when Chad was just talking about the the roof and the rafters, that brought up a whole bunch of questions I wasn't going to ask, because that's all been taken care of. But
ask
those are the kind of things you really need to keep after something like that.
Yeah, ask away. I'm happy to any details.
I was waiting for you to just go through the whole thing first.
So tell us. It's hard
to figure out where to start on this one, because there's so many parts. But I'm happy to dig into the roof, the foundation, whatever.
I guess, Chad, my question would be, so you get this old this old house that needs to be renovated, and and when the guy said, hey, it's your, the first thing he said was that they want to everything from bulldoze it down to you wanted to fix it up. So at that point, what did they? Looking back on it, what did they first say when you said, okay, well, wait a minute, I want to, keep it, and I want to keep all, I just want to fix it up. And did you have an inspector go through and look at everything and, say this, and this? Yeah,
I did have an inspector go through, and that's something I recommend. I've bought hundreds of properties. I've crawled under crawl spaces all over the place, but I still feel like it's such a valuable thing to have an inspection. And so I did get an inspection. And it was a long list. I mean, it's like, this is wrong. And some of the big red flags that I think most people should avoid, and I even considered avoiding as well, are foundation issues, and also on really old houses in particular, and also the roof issue. Like, when you have an old roof like that with a leak, you can tell there's leaks, but you just don't know until you start ripping things out in an old house what really is behind those walls, what's really in that attic. And so the inspector took pictures and said, here's all these things that look wrong. But they also always say, we don't know what's behind that wall. We don't really know until you get an engineer out here to tell you what this foundation is going to take. So those are some of the kind of red flags up front. One of the reasons why a lot of contractors might say, I can't even give you an estimate for that. Like, you just need to bulldoze this thing, because they're used to new construction or they're used to smaller projects. And that's the risk that all of us taking on really old houses have to know. There's just unknowns. You just don't know.
Yeah, because I remember on our first discussion was that if I remember correctly, that you did talk about the foundation issues. It might have been in your YouTube that I think you might have talked about that. I'm not sure.
He's under the house in his videos. Yes.
Yeah, right. That was it. That was it. And so, as we get into this discussion, things like, would you reconsider things when you saw that list?
Yeah. So what I think I would do differently, I was trying to brainstorm before I got on the call just to think, and I think I would have made my life a lot easier. Here's kind of my thought process as I got into it. I looked at the budget. I'm the investor, so I have to allocate the budget. And we had enough capital. We were paying cash for this, by the way. So this is a partnership I have, and we were paying cash for the property, paying cash for the remodel, and so we had a certain amount of money set aside, even though it was a big amount of money. And the difficult part was, what is this budget? And I got a couple of contractors. Finally, it was difficult to get anybody to give me an estimate for this bigger project right in the middle of the coronavirus, by the way, as well. It was right. We bought the property into 2019, but we had tenants in there and we let them take some time to get out. I think they were all out by February of 2020. And so we're out there getting contractor estimates, doing a few little things in February and into March. And then, COVID hits. And so that it made it, the construction industry all over the place was already pretty busy in our town and community as well in South Carolina. And so just getting a contractor to give me an estimate was tough. But I think what I would have done differently, I had a couple of general contractors who finally did give me estimates, and they were above what I thought, what I thought it would cost. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember the numbers. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it was probably like $140,000, $150 maybe. And I think, and maybe when I added up their estimate plus a few other things I know needed to be done, and I thought that was too much. I thought it was maybe 120, 110. And so here's the big mistake I think I made on a big project like this, even after doing a lot of remodels, was I thought we could hire piecemeal, like, all right, I'm going to hire a good foundation contractor. I'm going to hire an electrician. I'm going to hire a plumber. I'm going to kind of be they're going to have to pull the permits. They're going to have to be licensed and all that. But I thought I could save some money being the project manager essentially. Mm-hmm. A couple problems with that. One is the city inspector didn't really like that. They didn't like the fact that we were bringing all these different contractors in. It's a big project. The other part is just my time. This wasn't my main thing, and so I neglected some of the delays that happened, some of the just following up on things, and ultimately we hired the wrong contractor for the foundation work, and so he did a bunch of things, some things right, but then a bunch of things that were not right. And so when I brought other contractors and engineer to look at it, it's like, he didn't do this and this and this. So we had a conflict with this contractor who I'd never used before. And so I think stepping back, like I'm getting into some details there on the foundation, but like if I would have hired, I had one general contractor who ultimately ended up finishing this project for me. He seemed kind of busy in the beginning of the project, and he just had a lot of things going on. But if I really would have pressed and said, hey, I need you to do this project for me. I trust you. I've used you before. I think he could have ultimately done the project for probably $30,000, $40,000 less than what I ended up spending. We ended up spending $185,000. We're still getting a few more little invoices in, but it's going to be about $185,000 in remodel cost on a 2,000 square foot project. So that's like a $90 a square foot is what we spent on the project. I think we could have done it for $20,000, $30,000 less if we didn't have to repay people to kind of go behind other contractors. And so the big lesson there, I think, on this big of a project, you've got to have a qualified general contractor to manage the entire project. They have their trusted subs underneath them. They probably have a relationship with the city permit person. The city permit person feels more comfortable with that contractor. And then you as the investor, me putting up the money, I can have a one-person conversation with that GC, and then we can go back and forth, and then he can be watching what's going on a day-to-day basis. And so that's kind of a rookie mistake, but it's also a little bit out of, I have enough experience to manage these subs, but I have not done a big major remodel like this in at least 2 or 3 years. And so my subs were not fresh. I didn't have all the subs underneath me who were ready to do all these things. And so I was having to start from scratch. Let's find somebody to do this. Let's find somebody to do this. And that not only created delays, not only cost me more, but it also was just frustrating to have to do all that. And we had some mistakes that were made because we didn't have that working relationship with those subcontractors.
Yeah, because I was going to ask Chad, how much time did you actually spend?
Yeah, how much day to day time? How much day to day time?
Overseeing this whole thing.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think for myself. I had a project manager, somebody I just paid just to be my eyes and ears because I'm busy and I just wanted to.
Sure.
And so I paid him ultimately, I believe it was $3,000 for his time just to go and kind of watch and take videos for me and pictures. But then I also spent time. I can't even count the hours now, but I mean, I was during parts of it, I would be out there 3 or 4 hours a week, meeting contractors, crawling under I crawled under that crawl space at least 4 or 5 times, like making notes on things that they needed. They, with my untrained eye, needed to fix. And so, I probably lost count at some point.
So I want to give you an aside. We've had several people ask us about wanting to save money being their own general contractor. And our John and my's general advice is generally don't do it. I know it seems like a lot of money, if they charge you 30% on a general contractor, but it's back to what you said. It's all of those relationships and all of that relationship with the buildings inspector and the relationship with the subs and is hiring people easy? Is hiring contractors easy, Chad? I mean, I already know the answer, but I mean, because it's not. And that just sounds like that's what most of your aggravation was from hiring, various different contractors, and especially right now, as busy as everybody is. Is that?
Yeah, everybody's busy. It was the middle of COVID, and I can't emphasize enough that trusting relationship with your contractors is such a critical thing. And we all know, like in any relationship, you can't build trust overnight. Like right. you can't do it. But when you have, there's a book I really like by Stephen, the son of Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits. His son wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. And to me, it's one of the most important ideas in business in general is that when you have a trusting business relationship, it goes fast. I mean, it's easy. You're not wasting all this time checking up on people, going behind them all the time. But when you don't know somebody, like even if they're a good contractor, you have to build that relationship. You got to spend time talking to them. You got to spend time watching what they're doing. Are they doing it correctly? Are they not? And if you value your time, first and foremost, that's a big deal. But also, like you mentioned, the relationships they have with their subs, like they have that same thing going on if they're a good general contractor. And I'll just give you one example. I think I got an estimate for some insulation work on this house for like $4,000 or $5,000 on one piece of the insulation. And my general contractor in the end got that same thing done for like $1,900.
Oh, wow. That's significant. Yeah, that's significant.
Yeah. So he charged a 20% markup on that. Like, so what?
That's right.
It would have been $4,000 for me or more, so I think that's just one example. Sometimes it's not going to save you money, but often they have that relationship where not only is it going to be more efficient time-wise, they can sometimes either be break-even or save you money on some things that you think you're going to go out there and do yourself when you don't have a relationship with that subcontractor. That's the big mistake I made.
Excellent. Yeah, we just we've told you our goal here is to help people save time, money, and aggravation, and you just hit all those points. I mean, all of them. There's no doubt. We can't give a better statement for why you should hire a true professional as a general contractor for a big project, or get a contractor that really knows what they're talking about when it comes to doing a major renovation, because it's just a different animal. It really is. So COVID affected you. Did it affect your? Did you notice any difference in cost of materials at all? Oh
yeah. From the beginning of the project to the end, 2x4s, went just the regular materials went up. I part of that I think was supply chain issues. Maybe y'all have been studying that a little bit more. Like the lumber yards are not over capacity or something like that. But the materials definitely went up. That affected us some. But that's another reason, going back to when you're planning your job. Like if I hired a general contractor, we got on the same page, we planned everything, we planned it out. No matter what the costs are, it probably would have been a 4-month project, or so, something like that, if they just knocked it out. It ended up taking almost 12 months. And so who can predict what kind of things are going to happen? But the longer you take on remodel projects, the more susceptible you put yourself out to like changes in the market, whether the housing market goes up or down. Like sometimes you can get lucky and, people pay more for your house later on, but often the prices of materials go up and you have interest, if you're borrowing money, your interest is ticking. And so usually the general rule is when you're remodeling properties to flip or to rent like this, you just want to get them done quickly because of their costs that are going to keep ticking and going up if you just take too long.
Yeah, it's carry cost, right? It just costs to own a property. I don't care what property you own; it costs money to own a property, even if it's vacant land, right? You still have to have insurance on it, things like that.
Right.
So it's all of that stuff. Yeah. So great advice, John. Did you have any questions just while we're on this one?
No, he's rolling. I mean, it's just amazing. I'll just chime in on getting a GC. If you're going through a big thing like this, and Larry, you hit on it. We get asked all the time about being your own GC and things like that. If you haven't done it in the past, don't do it. And it's amazing that Chad, you brought up a great point that the guys already have their relationships built with their subs. And they know exactly how their subs work and when those subs, the availability and what their specialties are and their strengths. And it's great that those guys can look at something and say, I can knock this out in, 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And they'll be pretty close to it because I got a guy, that knows exactly how to do this. So, it's really good advice.
Yeah. So it brings up another question too. So you grew up in Noonan, Georgia, which is about 20 minutes south of Atlanta. Is that right? Something like that?
Yeah, about 30 miles south. Yeah, kind of go down I-85, down Allen Jackson Highway. That's where I grew up.
Yep. So we recently just had a tornado down there, and you wrote I think it was a blog post or maybe it was a video post, I don't remember. But your dad still owns rental properties down there, and fill me in on the story, and then give your perspective on that too, because it kind of plays into this conversation to a degree.
Yeah, so I grew up in Noonan, and my father and mother have retired now, but she was a dentist in town, and my dad had rental properties over the years, and so they still have rental properties there. And as a lot of people might remember, a tornado recently hit, and it was a pretty major tornado, lots of damage, and luckily none of my father's tenants were hurt, but there were a few properties that were right in the path, so I went down to try to help out, and just kind of get organized and just move things out. And he had three rental properties in particular. One mainly it was amazingly just tons and tons of tree damage. And so this has made me very aware, whether you're a homeowner or a rental property investor, like I've always been aware of trees and what the potential for damage when those fall down could be. But that's one of those things that you gotta pay attention big time to that potential, that cost. And so if that tree falls, or if it gets old and the branches are falling down, do you have to just hire somebody to go cut that and trim it up or cut it down completely? In this case, the trees fell on the house itself. And so one duplex he has, the whole roof structure, basically, I think they're going to have to chop the top of this house off. And I think they're already in process of doing that and rebuild the framing of the roof because it just got crushed so much by a couple trees. And then the key thing though was that going back to relationships with contractors, my dad has some people he works with regularly, kind of a carpentry general contractor who also does some roofing for him. And because he had that relationship, that it happened on a Thursday. By Friday, Saturday, right before it was going to rain Saturday night, this guy got out there to the properties and put tarps on there. And so I was down there while he was doing that. And so just getting tarps on so that you can minimize the amount of water damage that happens, because the roof is one thing and getting the trees crushing the roof structure, you can rebuild that. That's going to cost money. But if you also get water in the rest of the house, now you got mold remediation, you got all the sheetrock starts falling in. I mean, it just makes the cost of that whole damage grow exponentially. And yes, you have insurance on that. My dad had insurance on them, but the amount you always want to have a lower claim if possible, and you want to minimize the amount of damage to all the personal property and your tenant's property and everything else. So that was the big rush. It's like, let's just get tarps on this. I went and bought some tarps in South Carolina because all the Home Depot and Lowe's is going to be sold out in Noonan. And then I drove down and brought the tarps in and kind of moved, help, just kind of distribute those. And so that trusting relationship with a contractor who's willing to get up on a roof at quick notice, put this thing on there when everybody else is probably calling him too, but knowing that, hey, he's been getting business for a long time. We treat him well. We pay on time. That to me was a huge lesson about going back to relationships and why that's important when it comes to an emergency. Like, that's all hands on deck, like if you treated somebody poorly, if you paid them late, if you treated them with disrespect, are they going to conveniently maybe wait until tomorrow to call you back or something? Probably so. So those things matter.
Yeah. And that it's just, John and I have talked about that, and we've experienced those kinds of things. And we both have customers that, we'll jump off a roof not jump off a roof, but I mean, we'll quickly drop what we're doing and go fix their problems because, just to your point, we have great relationships with them. And I think that, folks, this is just kind of my perspective on it. You think that contractors are a dime a dozen. Contractors are a dime a dozen, but good contractors are not a dime a dozen. And they are professionals, and they can be expensive at times. But at the same time, you should get some sort of value out of your contractor relationship. So that's why I was glad you told that story, because it's very, very interesting to me, because that's a real, as you say, that's a disaster situation. And that your dad's contractor had his phone didn't stop ringing. I mean, it didn't stop ringing. That tornado down there was bad. It was a bad one. Was it an F4 or an F5? I think it was an F4.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of the biggest ones. Yeah. And I mean, you always see these things on the news, but when you actually see the path, like, a half a mile wide or whatever it is, and it's like, just used to be a forest there. There's just a bunch of little twigs, look like toothpicks. You're like, what? What could?
Yeah.
Glad I wasn't here.
Went off.
Yeah.
It's like a bomb went off. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, awesome. So, Chad, tell us about your activities, because you've given us a great rundown on this triplex. I hope that people appreciate your experience in this very complex project, which in turn, and you went over budget by, how much did you go over budget on? Well, you were saying 120 and you said 185, so you were about $60,000, $65,000 over.
$60,000 off, yeah. And I guess if you don't mind, I will give a kind of a final kind of advice on something else that I think that bailed me out a little bit is, I've been investing for a long time, and whether somebody's buying a home or whether they're buying an investment properties, managing your remodel is one thing. And we've talked a lot about that, hiring good contractors. We could talk a lot about putting budgets together. But so I underestimated a good bit. And part of that was just me being a little bit out of tune with the market. Mm-hmm. Part of that was COVID prices. Part of that was my mismanagement of the contractors having to double pay for stuff. So I think it's just a combination of those three things. But the thing I did well, to my credit, was buying it pretty cheap. So the fact that I bought it for $40,000, the end result of this is that, $185,000 in remodel cost, a couple thousand in closing cost, plus $40,000 is I have about, almost $230,000 in the property. And the property is renting for, two of the units are for $750, one is $700. So I think we're right at $2,200 per month. And for just the quick math for those looking at real estate investments, that's still not a bad deal. Like it's mm-hmm. not as good. It would have been a pretty good, if I would have done it on budget, it would have been a really solid deal. It's going to be not bad. Like I'll probably make even without a mortgage on it, 7% return, from my income on the property. I'll probably make another 2 or 3% from, appreciation over time. So I'll make a 9 or 10% return on this property that I screwed up on. Right.
and it meets the 1% rule, right?
It's around the 1% rule, which people all over the country are scrambling. Where can I get a property that meets the 1% rule?
Right.
Well, the point is, I had a relationship on the front end to find this deal and to have a realtor who brought it to me. And, they asked me to pay more for it. And I said, no, this is the most I can pay. And I tried to do the best I could estimating it. But when you do remodel projects, because there's so much uncertainty, whether you're flipping it, whether you're renting it, you've got to build a big margin of safety in on your purchase for this exact reason. Mm-hmm. This is why I always do it, is that you don't want to, if you live by the razor's edge of just saying, oh, well, I'm going to be exactly on budget and then I'll make a 7% return or a 10% return, you're likely to not be successful in the investing world, because there is a lot of uncertainty. You can't predict exactly the way things are going to go. So I guess that my main takeaway here for those of you who do want to invest is to build a margin of safety. You got to always have a cushion there to make sure you can account for these kinds of situations.
Yes, and we concur wholeheartedly with that. And don't put off deferred maintenance.
Yeah, that as well. Yes.
So, Chad, tell us what you do. Tell us what you actually do. Give us a description of all the things that you do, because I follow your work. I love what you're doing. I think you're doing a great service to people out there, for people not only in the investing field, but in my opinion, if you I own rental properties as well, and you know that, and our listeners know that. But when you own a home, even if you just live in your home, the principles are basically the same. There's not a whole lot of difference other than quantity and scale. So,
right.
A home, stuff breaks in your home just like it breaks in your rental property. I think the advantage of talking to people that are in the rental business is they have multiple experiences of, you've bought more homes, just for example, you've bought more homes than probably 95% of all the people in the United States? I would assume
right.
maybe more than that. I don't know, but I know it's way up there, because most people buy maybe 2 or 3 homes in their lifetime. You've got 110 in the circuit right now, and that puts you way up there. So tell us what you do, and and do that.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank y'all for having me on again. So what I do with most of my time, like I used to be full-time in real estate investing, flipping houses. I spend a lot less of my time doing that now. We still have the properties, but as I said earlier, I've outsourced a lot of that, but I still obviously stay involved with that. And what I've spent a lot of my time on now is teaching and helping other people get into the business of buying a property or two or more. So I have fun with it. I have a YouTube channel where I do more of like the tutorial stuff. Like if people wanted to see behind the scenes of this triplex, I have a series of videos showing like me crawling under the crawl space and interviewing, looking at what we're doing now. And I'll do a recap video where I show all the numbers of this and the spreadsheets. So that's my YouTube channel, is more of a kind of visual, follow along with me, or teach you how to analyze stuff or run the numbers on things. And then I also do a podcast, which I think is fun as well, because I interview other people and have conversations both with brand new investors or people who are more experts in both the real estate field, but also financial independence, about how do you just save money and invest and do things a little bit differently so that you can have more free time to do what matters. That's my theme of my website and my podcast. And so that's really what I spend a lot of time on, just being a teacher and helping other people through my online platforms. And most of that, you can find all of that at coachcarson.com, is where I have links to my podcast and videos. And then also I do some courses for people who are looking to dig into how do you actually buy a property? What's the paperwork? How do you make an offer? How do you run the numbers? I get into a lot of the details through some online courses I have there.
All right. Awesome.
Oh, fantastic.
Do you have anything for us? Is there anything you want to ask the Handyman Pros? John and I, we do a little bit of work around the world.
Well, I need to ask both of you and get on your speed dial before I do a project like that again, so you can talk some sense into me. But if you don't mind.
My friend, you can always call me. I don't have a problem with that. I will walk you off the ledge in a minute.
All right, good.
All right.
I guess I did it so other people can learn from me. Maybe that was the purpose, so I could come on the show and share other people how to not to do things.
It's not so much not how to do. Yeah, as you said it, you ended up really in not a bad position. It ended up not being a bad position, but you took your years of experience and created that. Whereas a lot of people might get into it and end up upside down, not upside down, but not in as advantageous a position as what you were in. So that was one of the things that was one of my takeaways from looking at how you did this project, and because I'm always looking for these projects too. And I will say this, anytime you get into a home that's built, I'm going to say, John, what would you say, past the 70s, that's older than the 70s, you're in a little bit of a different world. And as you step back, through time, it gets more challenging and more challenging and more challenging. So I grew up in a house built in 1812 that did not have nails in it. And, that's a whole different world than a house built in 1890. And that's a very different.
Tent,
It was it was pegged together, smart guy. But yeah, it was a goat's tent. Johnny's my comedian there, Chad. That's the reason we keep him around.
I love it.
All right. Anyway, we would like to thank you for being on the show, and we will have you on again. So
please give me a call. I appreciate your time, and thanks for what you're doing.
All right.
Thanks so much, Chad. It was great.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Chad for being on the show. John, what'd you think?
Oh man, like I said earlier, that it's always great to talk with Chad. Very polished, knows what he's doing. Brought up a lot of great topics and great advice for folks. But the one thing that overarching for me that I'm walking away with here is again, working with GCs and how they actually, having that relationship and building relationships is very important. And he even mentioned that, that the guys, the GC was saving him money in the long run. And also, so that ties in with time. Time is money, right?
Time, money,
so time,
and
money, and aggravation. Right? Just kind of the three things we always talk about. And it was just interesting that no matter how many times you do it, right? And I think that might be something you kind of took away too.
Yeah, I one of my biggest takeaway is I've been associated with Chad. I mean, I've been following Chad's stuff for several years now, and he's really what I affectionately call a real planner. So he does everything by spreadsheet, and he really gets into the nitty gritty. And in this case, he owns 110 properties. He's been in the business for about 20 years or so. This is somebody that's very, very, very professional and really has a very high level of competence when it comes to doing a larger project like this. My takeaway is this: things don't always go as planned. Now, I mean, I know we got thrown COVID in here and a few other kind of sideballs, but one of the things that I just loved the way he got as he gets into the conversation, and it rhymes in with the general contractor and things, is how he had a certain amount of regret for not using the general contractor straight away because, well, he's got lots of experience and he should be able to do it. But even subsequently, he realizes that was probably not it because it didn't go as planned. And specifically, the older the house is, we touch on it a little bit, but the older the house is, the more chance for error. So that was my major takeaway was build those relationships, as you said, John, because you're right on the money. And because things don't go as planned, you need you need the specialists, I guess I want to say. That's kind of that was my big takeaway. Was there anything else that you
Yeah, I mean, no, that's that. I think I looked at that as great advice for everybody out there that's going to go through, no matter what you're going to do. If you're going to do a renovation or a remodel, and you just have to really plan it out, have those, and really know what to expect. And even when you do know what to expect, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, honestly, it's and it's one of those things. I think the other thing was that I think he gave a good bit of advice there, Larry, and it's kind of in your wheelhouse. Is that if you're going to buy a rental property to fix up, is to try to buy it as low as you can to build in that buffer, because he wound up going that much over on his budget to renovate the place.
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of what I took away from, and I'm really looking forward to following up with Chad and having him back on the show.
Absolutely. So, John, do you think when the spaceship lands in your yard, do you think they're planning on the fact that you're going to run out there with the tools?
Well, I will tell you this: he was on time and on budget. So.
All right, folks.
Larry, you're signaling the end of the show.
Yes, that's our signature. And one of these days, I'm going to post the videos of Allie driving with me. That's Allie N, who sits in the front of my van. So if you see a Nissan NV 2500 driving around in the greater Atlanta area, and there's an alien standing in the side, that's me.
Call the men with the white coats. It's Larry.
It's me. Folks, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. Go to our website. You can leave us a message. You can join us on Facebook. It's at Handyman Pros, or you can follow us on Twitter at Handyman Radio. Thanks so much, and we will see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.